Hello, this is Ron Like Bill, and this video is about how to get fluent in a foreign language. That I uh, I'm not sure what your level is. That it will depend some on your level, but here's what I would recommend. That you're probably some kind of beginner in the foreign language, and so I would recommend first of all get an online tutor. That you can go to italki or Preply is the one that I use, and get an online language tutor, or you can get one pretty cheaply. They have some that are cheaper called community language partners that maybe aren't as skilled, but can also help you. Second, I would do a program called Pimsleur. It's very good at teaching you to speak the foreign language, which I assume is your priority. However, I do recommend you do all four skills, which are reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and work on your pronunciation. The Pimsleur is good to help you with pronunciation as well. Um, and it is just a speaking program, though. But the beauty is you can do it. Even you don't need to be in front of your computer reading it all the time. You can just have it going on your phone with your earbuds in when you're going for a walk or something. Although people might think you're a little bit weird because you have to say things aloud, and it's important to say the words aloud to practice your speaking. All right. So the other thing I would recommend would be to get a list. There's lots of online lists of the 1,000 most common words in the language, and learn those. That there's online programs like Anki or Quizlet are popular ones, and they probably already have decks made for your language. You can just use one of those, or there are lists online where you can put into a deck and start memorizing those. That will be helpful. It's important as a beginner to get lots of vocabulary. I also suggest that you do this. Find an easy book. There are like easy readers in foreign languages, and get the audio book that goes with it so that you can listen and read at the same time, and you can do that as a beginner. That that you may not understand it at first, but uh, that you may have to look up some words, maybe a little bit of work, but repeat it. Repeat it, maybe repeat the first chapter several times, and your comprehension will improve with each repetition. So that's something I also recommend. I also recommend you do, if you're a beginner, you're not at the point where you can do a real oral conversation language exchange. So I recommend you do a written conversation language exchange. You go on Hello Talk or Tandem, one of these apps, and find someone who speaks the language that you're trying to learn and they're trying to learn English, and have a written conversation with them where you're messaging each other. And that will help you because you're doing real conversation. There's real communication gap there. It's just in writing, and in writing, you see, you have the time, and you can look things up if you need to, and you're there speaking with writing, messaging with a real native speaker, so they can give you feedback. If they don't understand something or you didn't do something right, that will help you also. That I'd also recommend you work on your pronunciation using, like, you can just use the Google Translate, put a sentence in there, hit that bell icon, listen to the native speaker, and then just mimic the native speaker. Um, I also use a program called Glossica, where they have a native speaker reading a sentence, and then you just mimic them, you repeat after them, and that's helpful also. But you do need to work on the pronunciation. And it's important to get all the sounds of the language correctly, and kind of the music of the language, how that flows. That is super helpful. That's why it's good to do a whole sentence instead of just a single word. That, but to really get to be fluent, once you've done some of those things, you've done the PIMSA program, you've learned the first 1,000 words of the language, you've got an online language tutor, you're doing the Anki deck, um, then I would recommend that you take the next step and have real online language exchange partners you speak to orally. And it's going to be a little bit hard, a little bit scary at first, but eventually you're going to be able to do it. That I do that 4 or 5 times a week in Spanish. That I just have people. We've got set times every week. We do half an hour in Spanish and half an hour in English, and I've got set appointments with people in various countries who speak Spanish and they're trying to improve their English. And so we just talk about whatever. You can do it where you talk about some article of interest, done that before. Often we just talk about what's going on in our lives. I've learned a lot about how to talk about COVID and vaccines and things in Spanish. That we might discuss things, or might just be personal things. What do you do over the weekend, or how was Christmas, and that sort of thing. So you have real conversations, and I think it's actually helpful. Kind of doing the same thing. Teachers tend to do this thing. It's like, well, now we're going to do this role play, or we're going to pretend like you're the doctor and the other person's the patient, or whatever. Well, first of all, role plays are not real communication, and so it's going to stick with you in your brain. It isn't going to stick as well. And second, you're not a doctor and they're not a patient, and it's kind of this weird contrived situation. And so what I do is end up having kind of the same conversations, because I'm always this same person, and I always did the same thing this past weekend, and I'm always going to do the same thing the next weekend. And I think the repetition actually helps, and kind of as opposed to learning a lot about a lot of different situations, of what it's like when you go into the meat store, or what it's like when you go into the florist shop or the dentist's office or something, and you have a whole bunch of information which you forget all about. Um, you have limited conversations um, about your own life that stick in your head, and you do it multiple times, which also helps it stick in your head, because the big issue with language learning, especially with vocabulary, is that you forget it. But if you get to the point where you're using it in a real conversation multiple times in different contexts, you're going to retain that. That is going to stick in your brain. One lesson about what it's like to go to the florist shop, that won't stick in your brain. Um, Even a week's worth of lessons about the florist shop are probably not going to stick in your brain, because you're probably not going to use that again, maybe ever, or maybe it'll be years before you ever go in a florist shop in that country and need to use it, and by then you will have forgotten whatever you did learn. Um, so, as much as possible, do real communication. Um, as a beginner, that's a little bit harder, but try to get into that as soon as you can. I did say, to learn the first 1,000 words of the language. That's real important as a beginner. And I actually switch after maybe 200 or 300 words from learning just words to learning whole sentences, because the sentences have a complete thought, and that's a little bit more meaningful than just the single word. And it also gives you the grammar. It gives you um, the word order, the everything right there with the sentence. And so that's real useful. I do recommend learning sentences. And yeah, once you get beyond that very beginner stage, if you've learned 1,000 words, if you've done the Pimsleur program, that you can move to doing online language exchanges, that it's fun. You will have a good time. You will enjoy learning the language. This is why you're doing it, right? And that's really the goal. And then you can have a real conversation in language, and that you have a sense of accomplishment. And I would continue with the reading, with the writing, the speaking, listening, the lessons. Those are all good things. But as you move your way up, um, some people move into speaking, like having real conversation speaking, sooner than others. Some people are maybe more timid. Other people are maybe more adventurous. But it's you know, if you wait, you just kind of keep waiting. Sometimes you just need to jump into the pool and swim, And even if you've only had a few lessons, that you will learn. It will work out. Now, some language exchange partners are not real skilled at teaching beginners, or they may not have the patience to teach beginners. So, if you're a beginner and you're trying to get a language exchange partner, well, as a total beginner, you can't really do a language exchange very well unless the person, um, is really willing to teach you, because you can't really have a conversation at that point. But hopefully you can find someone who will be patient. The whole world wants to learn English, by the way. So if you're a native English speaker, you will find a language exchange partner. You can find one that we're in demand, because English is such an international language. What I do is I do half the time in Spanish and then half the time in English. And that way, because sometimes the other person's English is better than my Spanish, and then the English kind of dominates the conversation. But no, you make it strict that first 30 minutes is just, your target language, and then the next 30 minutes are in English, and it's clear when the 30 minutes are up, and then you switch so that the thing, doesn't slide into an English conversation and you don't get your chance. That's not really fair. And there's some people who are better partners than others. Sometimes people don't show up for one reason or another. I tend to like to have set times every week that this is when we do it, and so we don't even have to set up new dates and times usually, because we don't have to talk about it. We just know every Friday at 5 o'clock we have our language exchange or whatever, so that it's clear. And so that's how you can get fluent in any language, is through that progression of using some different methods as opposed to just using one method or one textbook. Kind of get a couple different methods going at the same time, and together that will really assist you, and you can quickly get into the point where you can have conversations with real native speakers. And then from there, you just keep working. You just keep doing it and having fun and speaking the language, and enjoy your language journey. Thank you.